That voice on the phone wasn't human. Before we begin, if you enjoy these true horror stories, subscribe to Dark Accounts and turn on notifications so you never miss a tale. Today, I'm bringing you 4 terrifying calls I received during my years as a police officer. Calls that taught me there are things in this world no cop should ever have to face. My name is Michael, and I'm 49 years old. I was a Chicago Police Department officer for 24 years before I took early retirement for reasons you'll soon understand. I joined the academy at 23, fresh out of college, full of ideals about serving and protecting the community. I worked in different districts across Chicago, from the wealthy neighborhoods of Lincoln Park to the tougher areas of the West Side and Inglewood. I've responded to every type of call imaginable: robberies, assaults, car accidents, domestic disputes, homicides. I thought after more than 2 decades on the force I'd seen everything. But what happened to me in November 2018 during a night shift on the West Side taught me there are calls that break every rule of what we consider possible. There were things that can't be explained. What I experienced that night changed everything. It was a Saturday night around 2 in the morning. I was on duty at the West Side District Station, covering the overnight shift that nobody else wanted because it included the weekend. My usual partner, James, was on vacation with his family, so that night I was working solo on dispatch, handling calls and coordinating the patrol units out on the streets. The night had been quiet until that point. A few calls about loud parties, one domestic argument that had resolved peacefully, a couple of drunk drivers that needed to be brought in. Nothing usual for a Saturday night in Chicago. I was drinking coffee, catching up on paperwork, when the emergency line rang. I picked it up automatically, like I'd done thousands of times. "Chicago Police Department, what's your emergency?" Silence on the other end. I could hear the line was open. There was background noise, like wind or heavy breathing, but nobody was speaking. "Hello? Is anyone there? Do you need help?" I asked, raising my voice slightly. Then I heard the voice. It was a child's voice, or at least it sounded like a child, but there was something deeply disturbing about the tone. It was monotone, emotionless, like reading from a script. "Help. I need help. I'm at 3247 West Congress Parkway, the old house. Please come." "What's the emergency, buddy?" I asked, already writing down the address. 3247 West Congress was about 8 blocks from the station, in an area known for abandoned buildings. "Are you hurt? Is there someone else there with you? Where are your parents?" "I need help," the voice repeated with exactly the same tone, the same cadence, like it was a recording playing on loop. "Please come. The old house." Something in my gut told me this wasn't right. In 24 years answering emergency calls, you develop a sixth sense for when something's off. People in real danger have panic in their voices, urgency, emotion. This voice was completely flat, empty, mechanical. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine this. You're alone in a police station in the middle of the night. The fluorescent lights buzz overhead. Outside, the streets of Chicago were mostly empty at this hour. And on the phone, you hear a voice that sounds human but somehow isn't. A voice that makes you feel something is terribly wrong. "Kid, can you tell me what kind of emergency this is?" I insisted. "Is there an intruder? Do you need medical help? Where are your parents?" "Come," the voice said, still with that unnatural tone. "The old house. 3247 West Congress." And then, just before the line went dead, I heard something else. A sound in the background that made my blood run cold. Laughter. Multiple voices laughing together, high-pitched and manic. But there was something wrong about that laughter. Something that didn't sound childlike at all. The line cut out. I tried calling back the number, but there was no ringtone, just dead silence. I checked the call tracking system. The number showed up as unknown, which was strange because even cell phones usually show some kind of identifier. I should have ignored my instinct. I should have sent a patrol unit to check it out and stayed at the station. But something was pushing me to go personally. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe it was that cop's sixth sense telling me this was important. I radioed one of the patrol units to let them know I was going to verify a suspicious call at 3247 West Congress and would be back in 40 minutes. I took the squad car and drove the 8 blocks to the address. West Congress Parkway in that area is lined with old buildings. many of them abandoned since the economic downturn hit the neighborhood hard. At 2 a.m., it was practically deserted, just some parked cars and trash on the sidewalks. Number 3247 was a 3-story house that had clearly been abandoned for years. The windows were boarded up, the front porch was collapsing, graffiti covered the brick walls. There was a chain-link fence around it with no trespassing signs, but the gate was hanging open. I should have called for backup right then, but I didn't. I grabbed my flashlight and entered through the broken front door, announcing my presence. "Chicago police, if there's anyone here who called for help, identify yourself." The house was a disaster inside. Debris everywhere, broken furniture, holes in the walls, water damage from leaking pipes. The smell was overwhelming. Mold, decay, urine, probably from homeless people who'd squatted there. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness as I moved carefully through the first floor. "This is the police. If there's a child here, call out." My voice echoed through the empty rooms. I was about to leave, thinking it had been a prank call, when I heard it. Children's voices, singing. A nursery rhyme I didn't recognize, in a language that sounded almost like English but wasn't quite right. The voices were coming from upstairs. You would feel your heart start to race. Your hand would move instinctively to your service weapon. Every instinct would be screaming at you to leave, to get out of this house. But you're a cop. You have a duty. So you go upstairs. I climbed the stairs slowly, each step creaking under my weight. The singing got louder as I reached the second floor. It was coming from one of the rooms at the end of the hallway. I moved toward it, my flashlight shaking slightly in my hand. The door to the room was open. I shined my light inside. The room was completely empty, except for one thing written on the wall in what looked like charcoal or something black and grimy. The words said, "You shouldn't have come here." The singing stopped abruptly. The silence that followed was more terrifying than the voices had been. And then I saw them. Shadows on the walls, cast by my flashlight, but they weren't my shadow. They were shadows of small figures, children, moving across the walls, even though there was nothing in the room to cast them. I backed out of the room, my heart pounding. That's when I heard footsteps, small footsteps, like children running. But they were running on the ceiling above me on the 3rd floor, running in circles, faster and faster, accompanied by that same manic laughter I'd heard on the phone. I ran, down the stairs, through the debris-filled 1st floor, out the broken front door. I didn't stop until I was back in my squad car with the doors locked. I sat there for a full minute, trying to catch my breath, trying to make sense of what I'd just experienced. When I finally looked back at the house, I saw lights in the 3rd floor windows, but those windows had been boarded up, and in those lights I could see small silhouettes, like children, pressed against the glass, watching me. I drove back to the station and wrote a vague report about verification of suspicious call, no one on scene. I didn't mention the voices, or the shadows, or the message on the wall. Who would believe me? The next day, on my day off, I went back to that house, in broad daylight, with people walking past on the sidewalk. I talked to some of the older residents in the neighborhood. They told me the house had been abandoned since 2005, after a fire killed 3 children who'd been left home alone while their parents were at work. The parents had been charged with negligence. The house had been impossible to sell or rent since then. People who went inside reported hearing children's voices, laughter, footsteps. Leave a like if you're enjoying this, and tell me in the comments, have you ever experienced something paranormal? I'd love to read your story. But that wasn't the only disturbing call I received. In fact, a few months later, in February 2019, I got another one that was equally terrifying. This time, I wasn't alone at the station. I was with my new partner, Sarah, a young officer in her late 20s who just transferred to our district from the South Side. It was 4 in the morning on a Tuesday. Chicago was in the grip of a polar vortex, with temperatures around -15 degrees. Sarah and I were in the patrol car, doing a routine round through the district, with the heater blasting and drinking coffee from a thermos. The radio crackled. It was the dispatcher from Central. Unit 15-4, we have a call from an elderly man at 428 South Ashland Avenue, apartment 3C. Says someone's been pounding on his door for the past hour, but won't answer when he asks who it is. Can you check it out? Sarah responded, Unit 15-4, copy, en route. We were only about 10 minutes away. There are things that can't be explained. What I experienced that night changed everything. 428 South Ashland was an older building from the 1920s, one of those classic Chicago brick apartment buildings with ornate facades and high ceilings. When we arrived, the front door was unlocked, which was already unusual for that hour. We went up to the third floor, where an elderly man was waiting for us in the hallway, shivering in a bathrobe over his pajamas. "Thank God you're here," he said, his voice trembling. "I'm Mr. Johnson. Someone's been pounding on my door since 3 a.m. Heavy, loud pounding, but when I ask who it is, there's no answer. When I look through the peephole, there's nobody there." We examined his door. No marks, no damage visible. "Are you sure someone was knocking?" Sarah asked gently. "I'm positive," Mr. Johnson insisted. "I've lived here for 30 years. I know every sound in this building. This wasn't the pipes or the neighbors. Someone was pounding on my door like they were trying to break it down." We checked the hallway, the stairwell, even went up to the roof. Nobody. The building was completely silent, all the other residents sleeping. We told Mr. Johnson it was probably just someone playing a prank or maybe a confused drunk person who'd gotten the wrong door, but that we'd stay for a while to make sure he was okay. We stayed in his apartment, drinking tea he insisted on making for us. It was a cozy place, filled with family photos and memories of a lifetime. We talked with him about his family, his grandchildren, his life. He seemed to calm down. Around 5 in the morning, we were about to leave when Sarah froze. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. I had heard it too. Pounding. Heavy, rhythmic pounding on Mr. Johnson's door. 3 loud bangs, a pause, then 3 more bangs, over and over. I stood up quickly, motioning for Mr. Johnson to stay back. Sarah and I approached the door. The pounding continued so loud it made the door vibrate in its frame. I put my hand on the doorknob and looked at Sarah. She nodded, her hand on her service weapon. I yanked the door open. There was nobody there. The hallway was completely empty, lit by flickering fluorescent lights. But on Mr. Johnson's door, on the wood, there were marks. Fresh dents, like someone had been hitting it with tremendous force. Marks that definitely hadn't been there when we arrived. Sarah ran her hand over the dents, disbelief on her face. This doesn't make sense. We searched the entire building, woke up some neighbors, asked if they had seen or heard anything. Nobody had heard anything except Mr. Johnson, and nobody could explain the fresh damage to his door. In the following days, I investigated the building's history. I discovered that in 1982, in that same LC3 apartment, an elderly woman was murdered during a home invasion. The killer had pounded on her door until she opened it, then attacked her. He was never caught. According to old police records, neighbors reported hearing loud pounding on doors in that building for months afterwards, but nobody was ever seen. Speaking of unexplainable calls, I need to share the experience I had in May 2019, this time in a small town outside Chicago. I'd been temporarily assigned to assist the Woodstock Police Department, a small municipality about 50 miles northwest of Chicago, because they were short-staffed. It was a quiet Saturday night. The town was almost deserted, most people in their homes. I was alone at the small police station when I received a call from a man who sounded absolutely terrified. "Please help me," he was gasping into the phone. "I'm on Highway 47, about 2 miles south of Woodstock. My car broke down. There's something out here. Something's following me." "Calm down, sir," I said, already grabbing the patrol car keys. "Can you describe what's following you? Is it an animal?" I don't know what it is. His voice was rising on the edge of panic. It's tall, maybe 7 feet. Sometimes it walks on 2 legs, but it moves wrong, like the joints don't work right. And the eyes, when it looks at me, the eyes glow red in the dark. Please hurry. There are things that can't be explained. What I experienced that night changed everything. I drove fast down Highway 47, the 2-lane road that cuts through farmland and forest between Woodstock and the smaller towns to the south. At that hour of the night, it was completely deserted, no other cars in sight. 2 miles south of town was in a wooded area, surrounded by dense trees and thick undergrowth. I saw his car on the shoulder, an old Honda with the hazard lights flashing. I pulled up behind it and got out with my flashlight. "Woodstock Police, is anyone there?" The driver's door opened, and a man came running toward me. He was in his mid-40s, hair disheveled and eyes wild with fear. "Thank God you're here. It's in the woods. I saw it go in there when it saw your lights." "What exactly did you see?" I asked, shining my flashlight towards the dark forest. "I don't know." He was shaking, though it wasn't that cold. "It was huge, taller than any person. At first I thought it was just a tall man, but it moved wrong, jerky, like something pretending to be human. And the eyes, when it stared at me, the eyes glowed red like brake lights." I checked his car. The engine was cold, like it had been sitting there for hours. The man, who said his name was Robert, explained he'd been driving back late from Chicago when his car started having problems. When he pulled over to call for a tow truck, he saw the thing emerge from the forest. "How long have you been waiting here?" I asked. "Almost 4 hours," he said. "I called 911 3 hours ago, but they said all units were busy with an accident on the interstate. I kept calling every 20 minutes. That was strange. I'd been at the station all night and hadn't received any calls from him until 30 minutes ago. I checked my radio. It was working perfectly." I decided to take a look into the woods. I told Robert to stay in my patrol car with the doors locked. I walked into the forest with my flashlight, following what looked like tracks from something large that had passed through, broken branches, disturbed leaves. About 200 feet into the woods, I found something that made me stop dead. There was a small clearing, and in the center, there were bones. Lots of bones. They were animal bones, mostly deer and what looked like wild pigs, judging by the size, arranged in a strange circular pattern, like someone or something had been eating there regularly and organizing the remains. And then I heard the sound, a low, guttural growl that didn't sound like any animal I knew. It was coming from deeper in the woods, moving between the trees. I backed away slowly, keeping my flashlight focused in the direction of the sound. I saw movement between the trees, something large shifting position. For a moment, my light caught 2 glowing points, red, staring at me from the darkness, at the height where the eyes of something very tall would be. I didn't wait to see more. I ran back to the patrol car. I told Robert I'd take him into Woodstock and we'd send a tow truck for his car in the morning. He didn't protest. He was eager to get out of there. When we got to town, I called the county sheriff's office and reported what I'd seen. They sent a patrol to the area the next day. They found nothing except the bones I'd seen, which they determined were from wild animals hunted by coyotes or feral dogs. But coyotes don't arrange bones in geometric patterns, and coyotes' eyes glow green or yellow in the dark, not red. To close out these unsettling stories, I want to share the last disturbing call I received before I retired. It was in April 2020, during the pandemic when everyone was in lockdown. I was on night duty at the station, almost alone because staffing was reduced. I received an emergency call from a landline, a small child's voice crying, "Please help, my mommy won't wake up." "Where are you, sweetheart?" I asked, my heart already racing. Calls from small children alone are always the hardest. She gave an address in Lincoln Park, one of Chicago's upscale neighborhoods. I immediately dispatched an ambulance and went myself in the patrol car. When I arrived, the ambulance was already there. The paramedics had entered the apartment. They told me the mother was dead, probably had been for several hours, cardiac arrest. But there was no child in the apartment. We searched everywhere. The apartment had 2 bedrooms, but the second one was completely empty. Not even a bed. No children's clothes, no toys, nothing. I asked the neighbors. They told me the woman lived alone, no children. She'd never had children. She was a single professional who worked from home. I checked the number the call had come from. It was the apartment's landline, the apartment where only the dead woman was, nobody else. Who had called then? Who had cried with a small child's voice asking for help? That was my last call as a police officer. I filed for early retirement the following week. After 24 years on the force, I'd had enough. There are things about this job they never teach you at the academy, things no training can prepare you to face. If you made it this far, leave a comment telling me which story impacted you most. And if you know someone who enjoys these true horror tales, share the video. See you in the next one.